Hello, and welcome into the M&M Discipleship Podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a disciple of Christ. We aim to look for God in our daily lives, be in His Word, and strive to live out the teachings of Jesus. I am Dakota Moody, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Michael Round. Michael, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Been a good week so far, and I hope it's been the same for you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You know, what's funny is I had a slight moment of panic because we started the podcast. I realized I didn't have our notes up. I didn't have the kind of traditional intro read up that I'm used to reading off and saying. But then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try to go off the dome, see what I can just come up with. And I think I nailed it. I think we've said it enough times now. We had talked about this just a little while ago, that it's just about a year, right on about a year since we first posted the first videos here, started the podcast, just right on about a year ago. I think we said it was September 20th or whenever it was that we posted the first videos. So it's been right on a year. So it's about time that I could finally say the intro without having to read it.
Yeah, and this is episode 43. So
Yeah,
we've done a few of them at this
that's
point.
right.
Kind of hard to believe, but we appreciate everybody that's been listening and joining in, and we're excited to hear feedback whenever we get it. So we appreciate that. But Dakota, so things are going good this week, you said?
Yes, things are going very well. It's a very good time here. Had our third straight week of over 100 people here at Upstate, which is great. And for those of you who don't know, maybe you go to a church of much larger than that. Like, for example, Mike was at a church of hundreds of people. But for us, we were kind of average attendance was in the probably low 60s about this time last year. And now we're in, like I said, average attendance for the last 3 weeks at least has been in the hundreds. So it's been great. Um, to have experienced this much growth. And it's great to be in a congregation that just feels alive, feels like things are just moving and working. And it's got a great feeling to it. It's also great to be rooting for the number one ranked college football team in the country. We'll leave that alone, though, but hook them. A lot of good things there. And what I've also loved as well is the weather this week has been absolutely Pacific Northwesty, and I'm kind of okay with that. I will never live in the Pacific Northwest because my wife would refuse to do such things. But I love just kind of misty rain and and upper 60s, and that's pretty much been exactly what upstate South Carolina has been so far this week. Is just mist. I can look out my window right now, and it's just misting. It feels great. I love that weather.
Well, we haven't had, well, we did have a little bit of rain from the hurricane, but we desperately need rain. We haven't had much, and it's been pretty pleasant overall though, and starting to enter into fall. I'm really excited. We're going up to camp at Dale Hollow this weekend, and for people in Tennessee, that's a new thing to me. I'd never really heard of Dale Hollow, but the more I learn about it, the more I come to realize that it's probably one of the hidden gems in our country. It's a great place, great lake there, pristine water. And so we're very excited to go up there for that this
That
weekend.
sounds
And of
great.
course, yeah, let you know how it goes. Hopefully it's a good camping trip. But so speaking of things outside of what we've seen, where is it you've seen God? That's an allusion to what I'm going to say. But I'll go ahead and let you start.
Well, fair enough, sir. I appreciate it. So, the thing that I have seen, so it's kind of an interesting thing because it's somewhat having to do with the outdoors, but not necessarily because I'm looking at it right now. Um, it's kind of a weird thing because I recently, so I've had a fish tank for a while in my office. I've always kind of wanted a fish tank, really desired a fish tank, and I wanted one as soon as I got here to Upstate. I wanted to put one in my office, and so I have a fish tank in my office. Um, and Michael can tell you it has been a struggle to figure
Mm.
out how to
I'm amazed
properly.
that it's still there. I did not realize it was still
I'm
there. I just quit
telling
asking
you,
you about it because I knew it was,
no,
you know.
it's great. I'm telling you, like, and it's taken a year to probably properly learn how to maintain a fish tank
Yeah.
and such things in that way. But it looks better than it ever has because I finally again learned how to properly maintain it. I got different gravel in it, different plants. It looks a lot nicer. But here's where I've seen God in this fish tank is this. So very different fish than I've had a year ago. I've had all those fish died. And we got newer fish and everything. But ecosystems should be working well now. And the thing that I've recently acquired was shrimp.
Mm,
Got shrimp in the fish tank and have put shrimp in the fish tank. First off, I love having shrimp in the fish tank because they are about as cool to look at as the fish. Just to see them like going around doing their thing. It's kind of cool to have shrimp. But where I've seen God in it is one reason why my tank is so clean now is because I have the shrimp. And God has created this system that we have in nature with a much more efficient system than what I've got in front of me in my fish tank, where he has designed all things within nature to work in a
mhm,
particular way. And I see it in the fish tank because the fish are here and they are, nasty, smelly little creatures, but they're cool to look at and stuff. And they create all this waste. Well, guess what? The shrimp goes through and cleans that up and makes the tank much nicer. And it keeps everything as it should be.
mm,
And this is a small little private ecosystem in this little tank. But then I look out the window and I see that God has done the same thing out there, but on a much bigger, grander, and better scale out there. And the creation that God has made and how it maintains itself because of the order and system that God has put out for it. Um, just, to think of that God has his hand intricately in the lives of each and every person while also building, creating, and working in all of that
mm, mhm.
outside. It's powerful.
It really is. You think about how specifically, like you're talking about, there's specific animals that clean up what other animals put out as waste.
Yeah.
And just how we breathe out the CO2 and other things, trees, plants take that in and then put out oxygen, and just
For
how
us to
how
be able to,
perfectly, yeah,
yeah.
to breathe again, and how perfectly designed it all is. We were talking in our Bible class on Sunday with the young adults. One of our elders is teaching it, and he was talking about the positioning of the earth to the sun and how that's perfect. It's
Right.
exactly where it needs to be. And for the size of each of those planets gravitationally, I mean, it's just amazing. All the things that are finely tuned that put together point to the existence of God. And that's kind of what I was thinking about as well. Not necessarily the ecosystems, but lately I've been getting out and fishing more and just seeing the beauty of creation. I love waterways, streams, rivers, and it's so fun and enjoyable to be out in it. I love wading in the creeks and rivers and um, to fish. It's just a cool thing. And Tennessee is a beautiful place, and I've enjoyed seeing God and all of that He's made. And it's kind of cool too because where I've been fishing is tailwaters below dams, and so you have the combination of what man has made to try and benefit from the things that God has created by damming up a lake and creating energy from that, but then also just creating a beautiful river, but obviously channeling things that God has made.
Mm,
It's kind of cool.
absolutely. Mm, so much to see in God's creation. I think when you read the Psalms, there's no way for you to take away anything other than, hey, if you want to see God, look for
Go
him,
outside.
and that's exactly what, David gets to. I think part of the reason why David gets to be so close to God is because he is just constantly out looking for him in creation. And that's kind of what we hope to do with this segment, to be able to see where we can see God in creation. And hopefully that encourages you all to do the same in your own lives. So
Definitely.
we hope that for you. As we continue on, we're going to talk about our continued study in the book of Judges. This week we're going to be looking at Jephthah, one of the great names within the Judges. So Jephthah and what he does. We're going to do this. We're going to discuss Jephthah by reading Judges. I believe we're going to be in chapter 11, and we're going to read verses 1 through 3 this morning. So, Michael, if you would read Judges 11, 1 through 3, and introduce us to Jephthah.
Now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior, but he was the son of a prostitute. Gilead was the father of Jephthah, and Gilead's wife also bore him sons. And when his wife's sons grew up, They drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob, and worthless fellows collected around Jephthah and went out with him. So after this happened, some interesting things took place. So he's driven out from the elder by the elders of Gilead, the leaders, his brothers, and then the Ammonites come and make war against Israel. And then they're like, well, what are we going to do? Well, we need Jephthah. And so they go out and solicit Jephthah's help. And Jephthah's like, why would I help you? You drove me out. And so he agreed to do it on one condition, that he would be leader over them. And they agree to do it because they're in a desperate situation. But Dakota, as we think about this, what are some lessons we learn from this passage?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting things that we could get from this. First off, we can see a theme that is evident throughout the Old Testament, things that, and I think we've talked about this before in the podcast and other such times, but there are things in the Bible that are described, and there are things in the Bible that are prescribed, and not everything that is described is prescribed. So we've seen a theme throughout the Bible, whether it be Abraham and his relations with Hagar, whether it be the multiple wives of a Jacob, for example, whether it was the favoritism that was shown first by Isaac and Rebekah towards Jacob and Esau, which then manifested seemingly from Jacob to his son Joseph as compared to the rest of his sons. We see when family dynamics are askew, if you could say, not under the will of God, there are always negative consequences to this. And we see that in this situation where Jephthah's father was unfaithful to his wife, seemingly, and Jephthah was the illegitimate child in this way. And because of this, he was never accepted into the family, and they pushed him out. And by the way, as well, you notice something at the end of that section that we read is that as Jephthah leaves, he collects around him a bunch of kind of no good people. At this point, right? He surrounds himself with these people.
The ESV says.
Worthless people. And what that tells me is, okay, well, he didn't get love acceptance at home, so he's looking to fall into pretty much whatever crowd he can at this point to get what he feels like he needs that he never experienced growing up. A lot of this, I think, is very important for our own lives because, again, what we see in this section, and oftentimes what we see even by the holy and righteous people, are not the best family dynamics, which leads to problems. So what we need to hope to do as Christians is, of course, we need to be prioritizing our family lives and having these proper dynamics in this way, because if we handle these things poorly, we can see a lot of the negative results that come from this.
Yeah. When we do things God's way, we're not going to be free of troubles, free of problems, but the command was given when they were to obey their parents, they were to obey their parents that it may go well with them. I think that could be attached to a lot of God's commands, that it may go well with you, that you're much more likely to do well generally. And when we do things counter to God's way, we're inviting trouble. Now, I want to say there's like a downward spiral here. There's Jephthah's bad decision to sleep with a prostitute. But
you mean
there's
Gilead's
also
bad decision.
I'm sorry, Gilead's, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Thumbs up. Gilead's, you're right.
Yeah.
Good correction. Gilead's decision to sleep with a prostitute. But there's also the sin on Jephthah's brothers by treating him this way. And I think there's a lesson for us. And here is like, don't just cast people aside and mistreat people. And then when you need them, bring them back. I mean, how manipulative is this? Or how just selfish is this? They're just trying to bring him back when they need him. So I think there's something there for us thinking about the golden rule and treating people how you would like to be treated. Dakota brought out a really good point that Jephthah then looked for validation and support and friendship, companionship, and whatever he turned to, or whether people collected to him, whatever the case was, it caused him to be in difficult circles, bad circles. And so we shouldn't drive people away. We don't want to be driven away. So we should be inclusive in our friendships and try to do that as much as possible. But we see an element of the golden rule and how we can live our lives differently. Is there anything else you see or anything else you'd want to add to that?
I think we've mostly touched over most of what I think can really get from this section, because it's important not only for us to go about living out for God in every way, but even when we do make a mistake, you don't want to compound it. So
Definitely.
the mistake was made by Gilead to have an affair in that way, but then there was a continual not well. He was never really truly welcome in his home. Jephthah wasn't in growing up, and then he ended up getting kicked out until they needed him most. And again, it's just something. Don't want to compound mistakes. We're going to make mistakes in our life. I could understand the anxiety that a parent would have in making mistakes and raising their children, but people are going to make mistakes. But it's about, what do you do with them afterwards? Do you
Yeah,
compound the mistake by making it even worse? And that seems to be what happens here.
definitely.
Yeah.
Very good point. Very good point. So Dakota, as we think going forward, what is it that you've been reading lately?
Yeah, so I mean, as I tend to do, I don't just read one book at a time. I should probably do it. Get a lot get quicker through things. Um, there's a book that I started reading, and it's something that has come to me because I've been thinking a lot about um, a good friend of mine, Ethan Brown, minister at Hendersonville. Whenever he prays, he pretty much ends every prayer asking for Christ to come back soon. And it's always a great thing that I don't hear very often from people, to ask for Christ to come back soon in that
Mm,
way. And one day, as I was looking through the books that I was thinking about potentially buying a long time ago, I bought this book by John Piper, which was Come Lord Jesus, and it is a meditations on the second coming of Christ. And as I was thinking about, you know, his words, the my very good friend up in Hendersonville, as he prays for this, as Ethan prays for this, I think to myself, okay, what am I doing that I don't have that spirit about me? Um, that I would willingly always pray for Christ to come back. And so I started reading this book, the and I've only gotten a little bit into it so far, but there's something that John Piper emphasizes, and that is that, Paul in Second Timothy, he talks about loving the Lord's appearing.
mm,
And sometimes that gets interpreted as we loved when he first came. But really, it seems, given the context of where he talks about then a brother who has fallen away afterwards because he kept striving after things of this world, um, it seems to be the context is the second coming and loving Christ's second coming. And I wonder to myself, okay, why am I not loving the idea of the second coming? Why am I not asking for this openly? And I think always the attachments to this world can so easily get in the way of us deeply desiring Christ coming again. Because when we think about that day, we should look at it with great joy. But I think I wouldn't be alone in feeling, like many others do, this kind of bittersweet notion,
mm,
in the fact that we know that is our hope. The day when Christ comes back, when the resurrection occurs, when the final judgment takes place, that is our hope. That is the day that we hope for. But what does that also mean? Well, it means an end to just about everything we know here
mm,
on earth. And when I look at that, do I look at that and say, great, it's an end to all these things that I knew? Or do I have a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, as I could call it, in the fact that there's things that I love here
mhm,
that I wouldn't want to just give away? And I look at those things and I think, well, if there's something that gets in the way of me desiring that ultimate outcome, that's probably something that needs to reduce in my life,
mm,
because it is causing me to hold back the hope and love and desire for the ultimate hope that I have when Christ comes back.
mm. I could definitely understand that desire. I mean, part of it too is our lives are so much better physically than the lives of the people in the first century. Like
Very
our
much
lives
so.
cushy and comfortable. We're not persecuted. So I would imagine there's an element of that in Paul's writing, Maranatha, come Lord Jesus.
Yes.
So I would wonder, I would love to converse with Paul. Was it more of that, or was it that he we take it at face value, he really wanted Jesus to come back? And I would guess there's probably an element of both, but mostly that second one. But yeah, no, that's a really good point. I don't think about that personally as much as I do fearing dying young.
Mm.
Because in that scenario, we have God's heavenly reality, whatever that looks like, right in front of us. And we do expect that that's going to be far beyond our wildest dreams. But yeah, that is something to think about for sure. I don't know anybody, because I don't know Ethan. I don't know anybody that prays, Lord, come.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're right. That's something to really meditate on.
Yeah. All right. I'd agree. And there's something that, and there's a little part of me as well that goes, but do I want to pray for him to come so quickly before many other souls could be saved?
Yeah, yeah.
And I can use that as kind of an excuse, but really, I think in my heart of hearts, I know
That's not why.
yeah, exactly. There's other reasons why I'm saying that. So
Yeah.
something to explore, and I feel like I'm wanting to explore more the deep depths of myself as I'm about to get into a sermon series in Ecclesiastes, because there's not a book in the
Yeah.
Bible that's going to make you go deep into yourself than that. But we'll yeah, very interesting thing. So I'll talk about that more as I continue to read this and to get these insights from Mr. Piper. But Michael, I want to hear what you're reading.
So last week I finished Is God Real by Lee Strobel. It was a great book. And I wanted to share something from the latter part of the book. He was meeting with Kenneth Richard Samples. And with his meeting with him, Mr. Samples said, I'd quote French philosopher Blaise Pascal advice to some of his friends. If you can't seem to have faith, why don't you do what people who have faith do? Why don't you pray? If there's no God, it's not going to hurt you. Why don't you open the Bible and read what religious people read? Why don't you go to church and see what's going on there? When you're around people who believe, who pray, and who are reading scripture, who knows what benefits you might derive? So I think this is very interesting, especially because I've read from other places that there is an element of benefit to the fake it till you make it mentality. And not that we should desire being fake or anything like that. But when you begin to do things, you begin to think like one of those people thinks. And there's an element of strength and growth in that. But Pascal's point is, you're not going to know what it's like before you try and reach out. You try and lean in to understand who God is. If you just kind of stand in your corner with your arms crossed and you're not trying to look for God or see things, he might appear to you in a certain way, but you need to lean in a little bit. It's a two-way street. And so I think it's interesting that he kind of brings up, well, what's it really going to hurt you? Now, what I would say to most of you listening is I would guess you are a seeker of some kind. I would guess you are probably a Christian. And if you are, you're probably like me in that you've had seasons of doubt or seasons where you don't feel as strong as you have in the past. Well, I think that advice is good for you too. Well, do what a strong Christian does. Do what Jesus did. Do what the apostles did. And you might find yourself going back to that well of strength. Obviously, if you're performing the spiritual disciplines, you'll come closer to God through what you're doing. And so I think that would help generate greater faith in you. And so that may be more of a relevant challenge to you rather than if you're listening, you may be a complete skeptic. And I would say also the same thing, but you try and lean in a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think another thing to say, because I think that was very well said, is I really love that call that to say, hey, give it a shot. You're an atheist. You give it a shot. See how it would affect your life in that way. my encouragement would be, because mostly we're probably going to be talking to a almost exclusively Christian audience on this on this podcast. Are you ready to have people come in who are just wanting to try it out?
Yeah.
Are you ready to have somebody who is a fully open atheist come into your church, who is skeptical, who is resistant, but is there?
Hmm.
Are we as Christians ready to open our arms to them still and give them as much love as we would a potential a person who's already a Christian who's potentially visiting your church to place membership?
Yeah.
Are we prepared to give them that amount of love?
Mm.
That's the other thing I would get from that. I mean, I think that's just such a great insight. I think you did a very thorough job of explaining that, because I think that's such a good thought for us to pass along, to ask somebody who is maybe in that situation, would it hurt you to try?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but are we ready when somebody
Mm.
does want to try?
Oh
And
yeah.
I'd say when we're exploring the inner parts of ourselves, are we ready for that?
Absolutely. No, that's a
Yeah.
really good thing to think about. I appreciate you bringing that up on the tail end of that. And yes, something for all of us. We're trying to
Mm,
reach out to our community. Well, are we ready for our community to come?
that's right.
So let's strive to make our hearts ready, and let us all think also about what Dakota was reading about, desiring for the Lord to come back again. We know, like Dakota alluded to, that God is patient and He is waiting, giving people a chance to repent. But we do look forward to that day when we're with Him for eternity. Well, as for now, we thank you for joining us on the M&M Discipleship Podcast. Until next time, let's look for God, learn from His Word, and live out His teaching. Have a great day.